Well, Justin, welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. I want to start
Thanks for having me, Quentin.
Not a problem at all. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Justin? And perhaps to do that, we should start with where are you from? Like, I know you're a UK resident, or at least you're formerly from there, but your hometown, how about? Tell me a little bit about that, Justin.
Oh, I think this interview is a little bit too short to give you a rundown on that one. So no, I'm actually not a UK resident. I haven't lived there since 1997, and before that it was on and off. So I was born in London. I've kind of over time developed this really weird accent that people are wondering, like, where's this guy from? He's either Dutch or he's South African or is, and I think that's due to the travel. So anybody watching that wonders, because I get a lot of comments about that, it's yes, I was born in London, but I've been traveling a hell of a lot. When I was 15, I actually moved to the States. I lived in Miami, and most of my career life, let's say, or the beginning of my career life was in the US. So I guess that's got a bit of an influence on my accent too. But since then, I've lived in Austria, in Bulgaria, in Riga, in Spain, back in London. So yeah, traveling has been a big part of my life, and obviously what's influenced the way I speak, and the curiosity everybody has about where are you from, because typically that's not a question. It's usually clear cut with people, but the minute people hear me, they can't quite place it, and it really bugs them.
That's super interesting. I was just watching one of your videos recently. It's a Brit in Latvia. And so I'm thinking, like, okay, you are from like the UK indeed, but interesting to know you're from Miami. Definitely did not know that, or I should say you had spent time in Miami living there, which leads me to my next question. In that same video of Brit in Latvia, Justin, you must have rattled off 3 different languages.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Fine and you?
Ah, where are you from?
France.
Ah, vous êtes français?
Ouais.
Ah, bah super.
Ça va être retirez l'écran.
Ils m'ont dit qu'il y avait un... Hello.
Voilà.
¿Españoles?
Sí, español. Yes.
Ah, qué bien. ¿De vacaciones?
No, de Erasmus.
Ah, estudiantes, ¿no? Ustedes no saben dónde hay sitio para disfrutar del fútbol hoy con...
¿Del fútbol?
Pero
sí.
con pantallas grandes. No quiero...
En la plaza hay pantallas grandes. Aquí pantallas grandes, pero eso sí no TV programs.
Where did you develop those language skills? Because so far, obviously I've seen you speak English, but then we got some French, we have Spanish, and we also have Russian in there, and you seem to handle yourself pretty well. Could you talk about how you develop those skills?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just like anything, if you want to be good at something, you have to be passionate about it. And I can honestly say that learning languages, travel and languages have always been my passion. It's something that fascinates me ever since I was a teenager in Florida, down on the beach. I used to work in electronic stores, back in the 90s when electronics, you didn't just have these big Best Buys, you actually still had the mom and pop stores. And we had a lot of tourists, people from Finland or Germany or whatever. And I made it a point to greet everybody in their own language. And that's really how it all started. So if a Finn would come in and I would say, "Mitä kuuluu?" they'd be like, "What?" And I'd try really hard to get the accent right and everything else. And it just developed a passion for it. I don't, sit in classrooms or take courses or read textbooks or anything like that. I really try and immerse myself. And now it's easier than ever. With the power of the internet, you can literally get online and listen to natives of every which language you can imagine right at at your fingertips. When I was starting off with my, journey of learning languages, you really had to go out there and either immerse yourself physically in a country where they spoke it, or create surroundings that would actually, allow you to experience that, which is what I did, let's say, with Russian initially. Which I must say is probably one of the most challenging languages that I speak. But yeah, absolutely. It's through immersion, through hearing, listening, and most of all, I would say, having the nerve or the courage really to use what it is you learn, because a lot of people often tell me, "Oh, I can understand languages, but I have a problem speaking." Well, that all has to do with confidence and practice, because if you can understand it, You can speak it, you're just afraid to. But that's something I don't have too much of an issue with, is speaking to people in their language, in my language, in whatever language. It really doesn't matter.
Certainly. That much is apparent, Justin, just from watching your videos. It's interesting because you had said, you know, you love to listen to music as a way to learn languages. And I think that's fascinating because I actually love using Duolingo and textbooks. Like, I'm more of like an academic in that sense. I don't mind reading or writing. I find like a lot of joy in that. But with a language like Russian, for example, I hear the grammar stories, like it's difficult to learn the grammar. So perhaps like walk me through how you learn Russian, because I know Bald and Bankrupt, he'll talk a lot about, I just simply speak and like I use the vocabulary and people kind of figure it out from there. But what's your strategy?
I mean, I always say that the first thing, depending on what your goal is, what you want to achieve. Obviously, if you just want to learn a few phrases, yeah, you can go and get a textbook and just learn them. But for me, learning a language is also learning about its culture, you know, different aspects of the language myself. And usually what I'll start is with random music. I'll try and get as much music as I can, and just constantly, and I mean constantly, whenever you have downtime. I used to ride the subway, let's say, going from London into the city. I would have 2 hours of Russian music constantly playing. And what it does, at first it's kind of weird. You don't understand what they're singing about. But what's most interesting, common words you start identifying within those songs, especially if you listen to certain, let's say, a collection of 5 songs on repeat. Eventually you'll start identifying sounds and start naturally figuring out where the words separate and where they begin and where they end. And you suddenly hear a sound and you say, I wonder what that means. You start catching the rhythm of the language. And that's the most important to me, is getting to know the rhythm of the language. Because then if you identify a word, and I remember for me specifically, I was listening to a song by Vladimir Vysotsky, and there was a word that kept coming up, Koni, Koni, Koni. And I'm like, I keep saying Koni, what does it mean? So I finally found a native and said, what does this word mean? It means a horse. That's it. That word was now part of my Russian vocabulary. It was engraved in my mind. And that's slowly, you just keep adding them. Now, using Duolingo and everything, I'm not against using any method. I'm all for learning languages. But for me, the way I found the most effective is really by just immersing yourself and really doing it like kids do it. You know, you see a kid, what's a normal, natural process? You talk to them, eventually make a sound that sounds a little bit like a word, and you figured it out. Then they start making wrong sentences. The problem is that for kids, we find it cute. Oh, how sweet, how nice. We encourage them. As adults, if you did that, people would think you're ridiculous, you're stupid. You know, what are you trying to say? And look, most people get shy and shut down. And I think that's really the biggest barrier. So it really doesn't matter whether it's Duolingo, textbook, if you want to take a course, you know, or Berlitz, or do it yourself with music and movies and everything else. The most important is actually you acquire some knowledge, go out there and use it, make it, part of you if you want. But by doing it with music and movies and cartoons, you get to know a lot about the culture, a lot more about the culture than just being able to communicate with the people. And the Russian culture is a very rich culture. There's a cartoon called Cheburashka, let's say, in Russia. And there's a specific song that is played in that cartoon when he celebrates his birthday, this cartoon, you know. And now at Russian birthday parties, they don't sing the happy birthday song to you only. They also sing this song from Cheburashka. Now, you could learn the happy birthday in Russian, but you would never know that there's another song that is usually sang that, you know, originates from that cartoon. So by doing so, you get a lot more, I don't know, you get a lot more feel, a lot more joy, I would say, from learning a language too.
Certainly. Well, Justin, I'm going to switch the tenor of the conversation a little bit. The first video I watched of yours was your first ever video, roughly 8 months ago. And, you know, there's some attractive women in that video.
And a lot of people claim that the actual statistic is that there are 7 women for every man. Now that is just an unheard of statistic. So I decided I wanted to investigate this. Just asking ladies a question, because yesterday I discovered a real statistic. You've been here long or you just arrived? Inga. И почему это так? Вы мне можете рассказать, почему? In the world, did you know that?
It's not in a...
Latvia has the tallest.
No.
No, Latvia has the tallest women in the world. Average height 170.
Yeah.
Look.
You can see.
Yeah, wait, hang on.
Majority of our population is women because we caveman and we saw them actually.
Are you joking?
Yes, we actually do caveman. What's great about them? Nothing.
You realize you're talking to a man, right?
Well, yeah.
That's fine with you.
And so I want to pose a question to you as a guy who's traveled to many different countries. In your experience, Justin, which country has the most attractive women, and then why?
Oh, that's a tough one. Obviously, that's a very personal question. Every guy is going to give you a different answer. When I was younger, I would have definitely said Eastern Europe. I mean, you know, because I just find them very attractive, very elegant. They're always groomed. You know, they might not have the best means in the world, but these women are always looking to take care of themselves in the best way they can. They're usually manicured, you know, and so on. So it's a pleasure, really. It's pleasant to watch. But I think as I'm getting older, a lot of it has more to do with the individual person's character and what they're like, and you know, how I like to spend time with them. Because, you know, I think the older you get, you realize that you just want your time to be valued and spend the best quality time you can. But that doesn't mean that you can't find a gorgeous Latvian that has all these qualities. So I think, you know, having said that the character is the most important, if I was to look for that character, I would definitely stick with Eastern Europe. Not necessarily Latvia only. I mean, there's some gorgeous women in Ukraine. There's beautiful women in Russia. But yeah, I've always had an attraction and you know, like a pull towards these countries.
Certainly. What about then, can we explore the dichotomy of Western Europe versus Eastern Europe? Because I get an idea that there's more of like a Western sensibility in a country like Spain, in the UK, in France, etc. Whereas Eastern Europe, which I've never been, truthfully, seems to be a little bit more, trying to think of the word, just traditional or old-fashioned perhaps in their culture and in the way they view the world. In your experience, what is probably more ideal? A more Eastern Europe culture that favors the traditional, or a more Western modern culture that seems to place a greater importance upon equality and things of that nature? Because again, like the stereotype, I think, is in Eastern Europe, a lot of those people, a lot of those women specifically, there's more gender roles and things like that. But we can talk about economy, but also who's happier? You know, like as a guy who hasn't spent a ton of time in Europe, who's happier, Western Europe, Eastern Europe? What social construct do you think works better?
You know, I will say that from my experience, the struggles are greater in Eastern Europe for the average person, because the divide between the haves and the have-nots are just too immense. It's narrowing now. It's getting better, but you still see a lot of people struggling. You know, I just got back from Bulgaria yesterday. I was doing some footage out there, and I met a seamstress, a woman who'd been working as a seamstress for 64 years. I brought her some clothes I needed altered, and she told me she was 80 years old. Her pension was 150 euros a month, and she had to still work full time to compensate her income. But if you see the way she was interacting with me, she seemed happy and content, and you know, all right, she had her complaints about her finances and, you know, having more month at the end of the money, but she was clearly a happy person. You could see that by the way she interacted. Whereas in the West, I can often see that you could see people, you look at them and you say, well, on the surface, they don't seem to have much to complain about, and yet seem to have miserable lives. And I'm not talking about everyone here. I'm just, a happy person will be happy. It doesn't matter if you put them in Eastern Europe or you put them in Western Europe or in Japan or in the US, because it's the way they perceive things, the way they interpret what's happening to them and the circumstances they encounter. And a miserable person, if you like, will be miserable no matter what they achieve, what they get, or where you put them. And I think that's just something that you really choose and decide that that's how you're going to live your life. And it's definitely the way I decided to live mine a long, long time ago.
I get that impression. You seem like a very jovial individual, someone who derives a lot of joy from probably just the simple pleasures in life. And it kind of leads me into my next question. You know, up until 8 months ago, you didn't have a YouTube channel, Justin. And so I think I have an appreciation for that, because I don't think everything you've experienced in your life has been documented. Whereas I'm a little bit younger, a lot of my like formative years are on the internet. That being said, what was the driving force behind you starting a YouTube channel, Justin?
Okay. Funny you should say that, because before I started YouTube, I made it an absolute point and effort to have nothing about me on the internet, you know. So it was just something that, you know, I lived a very personal life. I didn't necessarily want it advertised everywhere. I couldn't understand the fascination in people wanting to share their breakfast or their lunch or where they're flying to or anything else. So yeah, I come from a different generation or a different, you know, era. But the YouTubing really started with my daughter. I have a daughter. I have two daughters actually, and a son. And my daughter, who's also on YouTube, and she's both of them actually started saying, because we were in Brussels one day, and they were saying, you know, you would really do well on YouTube. I'm like, come on, what you see on camera is pretty much what happens all the time. I do interact with everybody. I do speak to everybody. I'm very passionate about my food and experiencing it and everything else. And I try and keep it as natural and me as possible when I'm on camera. Yeah, it was really my daughter. And the first time it really started as a joke. I said, all right, what can I do on YouTube? So I was out partying with a couple of guys who were telling me about Latvian women, as guys do after they've had a few drinks, and then telling me about these wild, ridiculous statistics. So I thought, okay, let me go and find out if it's true. So I made a little video just trying to identify if what they were saying was true or not. It turns out that maybe it was exaggerated, but you know, having spent a good 7-8 months here now, I can honestly say that, you know, the ratio is a lot more women than men. That's for sure.
Diving a little deeper into that, then you're good with the camera. Like, you have a charisma, a persona that I think you do a really good job embodying. Do you like being in front of the camera, or do you kind of yearn for the life without the camera? What at this stage, how do you feel about your YouTube?
Well, something you would know about me is that if I didn't like it, it wouldn't be happening. I have a very, very strong and strict rule in my life that I don't do things I don't enjoy doing. I've gone through, you know, the stages of building, and I've just come to the understanding that it's much easier doing this stuff. People spending time with the people you like, you're not going to sustain it. It's not going to produce anything. So the camera doesn't bother me. I mean, I can't say that it was my lifelong dream to be in front of a camera or on stage or anything like that. No, by no means. But I got to say that since I've started doing it, and I do all the, you know, the editing initially I was doing. Now I've got, you know, my son is 14 years old. They're much better than we are at computers and everything else. And he's seen how I want the videos edited. And now we kind of do it together, where I give him the structure and he does a lot of the cuts and, you know, and all that. So, but having the camera is something, no, I really enjoy the idea of putting my life on YouTube, because I would be fascinated right now if I could see, let's say, my grandparents and what they were like and how they lived their lives. But obviously technology didn't allow that then. Whereas now, all right, my kids know me, but it'll be interesting for their kids and maybe their grandkids to say, oh, this was Justin. This is what he was like, you know, a guy going all over the world and having a lot of adventures and fun and experiences. And I think it's just a fascinating way of recording your life. So it's not necessarily having the camera. The camera doesn't bother me. But I think that anybody who's thinking about doing YouTube but thinks, I don't like the camera, that's already going to be a problem, because that's going to be hard to sustain.
Makes sense. Let's fast forward a few years. I don't necessarily get the impression, Justin, that you, based on our conversation, that you're trying to become the second coming of Bald and Bankrupt. But what would you hope to accomplish in these next few years via YouTube? Would you like to, develop an audience? Would you like to, I don't know, perhaps you could fill me in there.
I mean, I didn't start this with the idea of having 1,000 subscribers or 10,000 or 10 million, and I think it's very important that I remind myself of that constantly, because, having been through life and done all the ups and downs, sometimes you're on top, sometimes you're at the bottom. I think it's important that every video you put out, you're only as good as the one you've just put out. So even if you have had huge success and people have told you how wonderful and great you are and charismatic and, you go for it, you will be the next God knows what. You always have to judge yourself on the last video you made. And if you take it with the same seriousness, with the same ambition to have fun, but to create some kind of production that brings value to people, in several ways. So there's entertainment value, but there's also, I like to give something that people can either learn something new or appreciate something or be inspired to do something or go somewhere. And a good storyline, a good storyline. I mean, I won't put out a video, let's say, and I'll tell you honestly, I have hundreds of hours of footage that I have refused to put up, simply because I have a certain framework that I have to work by, and they have to fit. And if not, they don't go out. And the first thing is I have to like the video myself. So when the production is done, and my son, who is fantastic at what he does, has shown me the video, sometimes I'll go, no, that's not going up. Or sometimes I'll look at it and I'll say, yep, that's good enough to go up. Then I'll have other people look at it and I'll say, watch this video. And then I'll say, how long do you think it lasted? If it was an 18-minute video and they said, about 12 minutes, it'll go up. If they say 22 minutes, that video is not going up. So there are certain things that I use to, like a quality control, if you like, that's important to me, because I don't want to just put a load of content and huge volumes of content just for the sake of it. I think that, because I know nothing about algorithms and all this stuff, all I know is that if I make a good video and I make another good video and another good video and people like it, eventually they'll watch it. So that's the only guide I can use really to how my videos go up, and how I'll be able to maintain that level of humility, or if you like, or standard, that you don't want to let it get to you. So great, people like your video, great. Will they like the next one? Let's make sure they do.
For sure. I want to take a step back from YouTube, Justin. In the last 15, 20 minutes, I really, I've been impressed with your answers. I get the idea that you just have had a lot of life experiences. You have a lot to share and a lot of value and knowledge to offer to people. That being said, what's one thing you'd love to impress upon people, at any age? But just one thing at this point in your life that you think is very key, let's say, to living a well-balanced life.
A well-balanced life, I will honestly say, is how I end every video. Enjoy your journey. And I mean that, because when we're young, we're all set on goals, achieving, we're all go-getters. We want, better cars, more money, better lifestyle, maybe better places. But what I mean by enjoy your journey is really that sometimes time just goes by, you achieve that goal and you go, really, what's next? And you realize that you just let it go by. You didn't stop and enjoy the moment. And that's why it's very important that whatever you choose to do, whether it be in business or your hobbies or whatever it is, if you're lucky enough that you don't have to worry about finances and you just have hobbies, or you're starting a business and you're starting in a business life or your career, just make sure that you love what you do, because then you really enjoy the journey, because otherwise it's just too much of a price to pay, balanced or not. If you love what you do, it will always be balanced, because I kind of think that balance comes in where you need the time to do what you enjoy versus the time doing the stuff that you don't enjoy. But if you make it a rule to enjoy everything, it's all balanced.
Of course. That's excellent. Well, Justin, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Quentin.